Hi, it's Devlin with MotorWerke. Today we're going to be doing a buyer's guide video on the W211 platform Mercedes, which is the E Class that ran from 2002 until 2009. Specifically, this one is a pre-facelift 2006 E320 CDI, which means it has the straight 6 turbo diesel engine. It's got about 271,000 kilometers. It's had a couple of issues that we'll go over, and that's really what this will be about, the things to look out for on these cars and what we've learned over time with having it. Of course, when you first walk up to the car, you're going to want to do a walk around, make sure there's no dents, scratches, rust, anything that would turn you off from wanting the car. You want to make sure it's sitting level. A lot of these cars have air suspension. This particular one doesn't. They all have level sensors to make sure the car sits at the right height. So if one of those level sensors is bad, seized, isn't giving the right signal, or one of the airbags is leaking, or the compressor isn't giving enough pressure, these are just things you want to look for when you first walk up to the car, and then you'll want to go for a drive. Preferably, if you can get them to let you start the car from cold, you can also do a diagnostic on the glow plug system. These diesel engines do have issues with their glow plug, where they'll sometimes either fail the harness, they'll fail a glow plug individually, or the module will go. That's actually what happened to this car. We've got a module on the way. And one of the ways to check that is if you start it from cold, the glow plug light will come on to tell you that they're cycling. Once it goes off, if you start the car and it comes back on for about 60 seconds and then turns off, that is usually a sign of the glow plug module going. When you start this car, you want to see if it shakes at idle, especially when it's cold. These things have dual runner intakes where they open and close flaps to let more air in at different times. Well, sometimes those flaps will break off entirely or they won't move, and you'll notice that the engine will be running rough because half the engine is getting more air, something like that. There's an uneven amount of air going to the engine, so they will run rough. That happened to this car as well. The purpose of the test drive is really to get the car up to operating temperatures. You want to make sure that you get through all the gears so that it shifts well, it drives well. You want to make sure it brakes. If you can get the car to go over some speed bumps, you want to make sure that you get as much suspension articulation as you can so you can listen for any metallic thuds. You might not hear something like a bad sway bar bushing or a bad sway bar end link until you get it over a bigger bump. Honestly, the drivetrain in these cars are pretty solid. We jokingly call this one our shop truck. It's a very robust car with 271,000 kilometers on it. The transmission is a good transmission. You want to make sure it shifts through all the gears. You want to make sure both the comfort and the sport mode works. You can try the manual mode to force it to shift up and down. You want to just make sure you put the car through its paces. Once you got it driving, you'll just want to roll into it a little bit, not to beat it up or go excessively fast, but you want to make sure that when it hits boost, that it can hit boost, and that you don't hear any massive amounts of air leaking or noise like that to show that there's a boost leak. You want to just make sure that the turbocharger is functioning. It's a fairly expensive part to replace. They're not common to go, but if it has an issue, you want to make sure you know. Checking the electronics of the W211 Mercedes is really where you're going to want to be the most thorough, because that's likely where the problems are. I mean, the newest W211 at the time of filming is a 14-year-old car, and they had a lot of electronic issues when they were new. They're not too prevalent to the mechanics of the car. They're usually for interior features, but you want to make sure everything works. So from the windows, the power door locks, the sunroof, any of the interior buttons from the blend door actuator, just make sure they all function by just going through them all when you look at the car. It's quite likely you're going to find something, and that's really going to be up to you and the seller to decide how perfect you want a 14-year-old car to be, or older if you're getting an older one. But you also might find that mechanically the car is sound and you're quite happy with the rest of the purchase. So it's really up to you and how you're looking at the car. A cool feature of these cars that you'll want to check as well is the rear parking sensors and the front parking sensors. They tell you how close you are to things, and they give you a sliding bar where it goes yellow to red to tell you how close you are to parking to another vehicle. The rear one you can see in your mirror, it's on the roof, and the front one is in the center of the dashboard there. You'll want to make sure the system is on, which is done down here by the shifter, and then you'll want to back up close to another car to make sure that all of the lights light up in the proper way. Or sometimes what'll happen if they have an issue is they'll be stuck saying that you're close to something. They're not the cheapest thing to fix, so it's nice to know if they're working ahead of time. That air suspension I was talking about has multiple modes. You can use that down here by the gear selector. What you'll want to do is just cycle it through any of the positions or the modes that it has to see if you can actually perceive a difference. Also, sometimes when you cycle an air suspension, it'll trigger a fault that it might not have done if you left it in whatever setting the car was in to start. So if there's some sort of compressor problem or height level sensor problem, it might not notice until you move the system. While this car has been fairly robust in our time of owning it, it is still a Mercedes. The more paperwork you can get for this car, the better, because it does have more features than a comparable car of the same time would. So if you're looking at it and it doesn't have much service history and it seems like they were only doing oil changes, they might have missed any bushings that might have cracked, they might have missed any sensors that might have gone, and therefore when you have the vehicle, if you get it inspected and you want it to be up to a level of perfection that the previous owner wouldn't, you might be left with a bill of many small things to make the car perfect that might turn into a very large bill. It might be worth paying the premium up front for the better car, that has been maintained to a higher level. Finally, I'll talk about the car's Achilles heel. The drivetrain is pretty strong and you won't notice that many issues with it. The electronics, while there are some problems, are generally quite small. The SBC Braking System is the braking system these cars used up until 2006, so this one has it. It was used, and it's a fairly problematic drive-by-wire system that these cars are known for having issues with. In the States, they extended the warranty for 25 years, unlimited mileage, because of how problematic it was, but here in Canada, we didn't get that. If you hook the car up to a proper Mercedes scanner, we'll actually give you lifespan estimates on all of the components of the braking system and let you know how close you are to needing to replace some of those parts, and it can be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to get this repaired, depending on what's wrong with the car. So we highly recommend, unfortunately, there's no way to look at this when you're consumer looking at the car personally, we highly recommend bringing it to a shop that has the ability to check the braking system properly, because that could be the biggest bill this car will have. If you have receipts for that getting fixed, it is gold on a W211 with the SBC braking system. Now that you've done the test drive and you're happy with it, we're going to go back to the shop and I'm going to show you a couple areas under the hood that you can check at home to see if there's common issues from injector seal leaks and other problems. After that, we'll throw it on the hoist. That'll just show you where the common areas on the bottom of the car are that you might be able to see when you're looking at it on the ground, but it's easier for us to show you that once the car's on the hoist. Once you're under the hood, you'll have to take off the T30 Torx bits that hold down the cover so you can see the engine. Under here, you'll be looking for any pooling of diesel or leaks that you can notice. These are the most common failures. You'll see them around the injectors here or on the fuel rail. You'll do a general inspection of the top of the engine for anything that might look amiss. Any fuel is your biggest concern, but broken wires or any connectors that aren't in the right place as well. Leaks around the fuel filter is common as well. You'll see them on the hose connectors, as well as any coolant leaks from the upper and lower rad hoses. The oil cap is known to leak. It'll cause buildup around it. You'll also want to make sure you check the coolant levels to make sure it hasn't moved. From there, you'll want to check any fuel pump leaks. It's mounted to the front of the block. They're common to leak around either the sensor or the pump themselves. Now we'll throw the car in the air and we'll take a look underneath. Of course, it's going to be hard to have a lift when you're looking at a car, but we're going to use this one just to showcase the easier points of looking. So here behind the steering wheels, you're looking at, if you have a two-wheel drive model, just the boots on your steering rack, and for any corrosion, loose ball joints that you can notice, any torn bushings that you can see, as well as any pooling. You'll notice there's a bit of weeping here from the steering rack, so we've noted that for a future concern. If you have a four-wheel drive model, you'll also be looking at your CV boots to make sure they're not torn. If they're torn, they could be taking in rocks and wearing out, so you want to make sure that those boots aren't torn. The most common leak we ever see on these cars is that electrical plug up here, which is on your transmission's electrical socket. Those are very common for leaking. It's a simple fix for Mercedes. If you're looking at it from the side of the car, here is your passenger wheel. It's right about where the exhaust comes down from the downpipe into the exhaust system. You'd only be able to see a leak of some kind, but it would be a red transmission fluid that would be coming out of there. That is the transmission plug for the electronics. That's something simple to fix, but good to know, because if you lose transmission fluid, it can be catastrophic to your transmission. Your exhaust system runs the entire car. These aren't bad for corroding, but you'll want to be checking to see from the side if you can see any holes or leaks. From the back of the car, same thing. If you're looking at it when you're on the ground, you're going to try to come into the side of the car here and look at these rear control arms. They are very known for corrosion. These ones have plastic covers to protect them, but if your car doesn't have them, take a good look at these control arms. They can rust sometimes, as well as if you do have covers, even just looking at the top there, the metal that you can see if you can see any corrosions, holes, rust, or anything that would concern you. And then check the mufflers and the rest of the car for any points of concern. Really, it's hard, as I say, check the car when it's on the ground, but these are just some things you can look at. I mean, from the back of the car, you can see the hangers. These ones have a bit of corrosion, but they're not rusted through, so they are going to be fine. These are the kind of things you just want to see. And for any weeping fluid leaks, something that would be a concern to you for the car losing its fluids. So I hope that helps you a little bit when you're looking at one of these cars, either the diesel or the W211 in general. If it is a little bit too much for you, or you want to make sure that you're getting a good deal on the vehicle that you're looking at, we do also offer pre-purchase inspections, or even if you're not in our local area, we just generally recommend getting the car on a hoist by someone who's professional or by yourself to just really get an idea of what you're buying. It really helps you in the long run getting a good vehicle. Thank you so much for watching.